The vastness of space near Pluto was never truly empty. For 50 years, a giant alien armada had floated there, silent and patient. This was the Cathar hegemony, a race of conquerors who believed in slow, inevitable victory. Their massive, sleek ships were a dark cloud against the stars. On the flagship bridge, High Commander Bakju watched the small, blue dot of Earth on the main screen. He was an old soldier, his tough, gray skin marked with scars from long-ago battles. Next to him stood his tactical officer, Daejung. Unlike the commander, Daejung was young and eager, his eyes glowing with a hungry light. "The final hour is almost here, Commander," Daejung said, his voice sharp with excitement. "Their time of waiting is over. Our scouts show nothing. No great fleet. No powerful weapons. They are weak. We should not have waited this long." Bakju did not look away from the blue planet. "We wait for the time we set," he said, his voice a low rumble. "We are not animals. We gave our word. We wait for their answer. Even if it is just screaming." But inside, Bakju felt a small knot of worry. It was too quiet. In all his years of conquering worlds, he had never seen a species do nothing. The humans had built some basic space stations and satellites, but nothing that could stand against the hegemony's might. There were no pleas for mercy, no angry threats. For 50 years, Earth had been completely silent. It felt less like surrender and more like waiting. But what could they possibly be waiting for? Daejung pointed at the screen. A digital clock showed the last few seconds of the ultimatum ticking down. "Look. It ends. Their silence is their answer. They have chosen destruction. Let me give the order to advance. Let us wipe their pathetic world from the galaxy." The clock hit 0. A soft beep echoed on the quiet bridge. Every eye turned to the communication officer. "High Commander," the officer said, sounding confused. "We are receiving a transmission. It is a very simple laser beam from the surface of Earth. It contains a text message." Bakju felt the strange worry grow stronger. "Show me." Words appeared on the main screen, translated by their computers. "Message received. Stand by." Daejung laughed, a harsh, barking sound. "What is this? A joke? A final stupid trick? They are buying time while they panic." But Bakju was not laughing. He stared at the words. "Message received. Stand by." It was not a plea. It was not a refusal. It was an acknowledgement. It was what a soldier said when he understood his orders and was preparing to carry them out. "Scan the system," Bakju commanded, his voice suddenly tense. "Not just Earth. Look everywhere. Their moon. Their orbital paths. Look again." The crew jumped to obey. For a moment, there was only the hum of machines. Then, the sensor officer's voice cut through the silence, tight with panic. "High Commander. Massive energy reading. Coming from the Earth's moon. Something is power up, something huge." On the screen, a section of the moon's cratered surface began to change. What had looked like rock and dust slid away, revealing a monstrous metal construction hidden beneath. It was a weapon of immense size, now pointing right at them. The humans hadn't been silent because they were afraid. They had been silent because they were ready. The two words hung in the air of the bridge. "Stand by." The silence that followed was heavier than before. It was no longer the silence of waiting. It was the silence of something about to happen. Daejung's sneer was the first sound. "A pathetic trick. They push a button on an old machine to scare us? They are insects." But High Commander Bakju felt a coldness in his veins. This was not the action of a scared species. This was calm. This was precise. "Silence," he roared, his voice cutting through the nervous mumbles on the bridge. "I said scan everything. Now. Focus on that moon." The crew scrambled. Lights flashed on consoles. For a few seconds, there was only the hum of their advanced sensors searching the empty space between them and the moon. Then, a young officer's voice, usually so confident, cracked with fear. "Energy surge. Unbelievable levels. It's not a weapon signature, Commander. It reads like a massive power generator. Or, a launch system." On the main viewer, the section of the moon that had opened up began to glow with a fierce, blue-white light. It was a deep crater, and now they could see it was not natural. Its sides were smooth metal. It was a barrel. A giant gun barrel pointed at the stars. "What is it?" Daejung whispered, his arrogance gone, replaced by confusion. Before anyone could answer, the light from the lunar crater flashed blindingly bright. A dark shape, too fast to see clearly, shot out from the moon. It wasn't a laser beam. It wasn't a missile. It was a solid object. It moved faster than anything they had ever seen a primitive species launch. It didn't come toward them. It shot past the edge of their vast armada, a silent black streak against the starfield. It was heading out, deeper into their own solar system. Track it. Bakju yelled. Sensors locked on. The object was a simple, giant rod of metal. 20 meters long. It hurtled toward a small, uninhabited rock of a planetoid far beyond Pluto, a place no one cared about. The entire bridge watched, holding their breath. The rod struck the distant planetoid. There was no sound in the vacuum of space. But the visual was enough. A flash of light, silent and terrifying, erupted from the impact point. It was a flash of pure energy, the kind released by a tremendous explosion. A cloud of dust and rock expanded slowly from the spot where the planetoid had been. A large part of it was just gone, vaporized by the incredible force of the impact. The weapon hadn't used explosives. It hadn't used plasma. It had used speed. It had taken a simple piece of metal and thrown it so fast that when it hit, it released more energy than a bomb. The bridge was utterly silent. The hegemony believed in advanced technology, in energy shields and plasma cannons. This was different. This was brutal. This was simple. This was like being hit by a mountain moving at the speed of light. Daejung was pale. They missed us, he stammered, trying to find hope. It was a warning shot. A show of force. They are still trying to scare us away. Bakju turned to him, his old eyes filled with a dreadful understanding. You fool, he said, his voice low and grim. That wasn't a warning shot. He pointed a shaking finger at the main screen, which now showed the moon again. The giant crater was glowing once more, power building for another launch. That, Bakju said, was them checking their aim. The silence on the bridge was shattered by a dozen screaming alarms. The main viewer flickered, trying to show 100 threats at once. Multiple launches, the sensor officer yelled, his voice high with panic. Not just the moon. We have signatures from everywhere. What they had thought were old satellites and useless space junk suddenly came to life. Panels slid back. Metal shells that looked like asteroids broke apart. From these hidden places, more of the massive launch systems revealed themselves. The humans hadn't built one big gun. They had turned their entire solar system into a fortress. The first wave of projectiles hit. They were not elegant. They were not fancy. They were just giant rods of tungsten, moving faster than thought. A hegemony destroyer, proud and powerful, was the first to die. Its energy shield flashed a brilliant blue for a microsecond as the rod struck. The shield shattered like glass. The rod punched straight through the center of the ship, tearing out the other side in a shower of molten metal and frozen air. The destroyer broke in two, its insides exposed to the cold vacuum. There were no explosions from the rod itself. Just the terrible, physical violence of its impact. Chaos erupted. Evasive action. All ships. Bakju shouted, but it was useless. The rods came in from all directions. They couldn't be shot down. They were too fast, too simple. The hegemony's defensive guns were designed to target missiles and energy signatures. They didn't know how to stop a silent, solid piece of metal. Another ship, a cruiser, tried to turn. A rod clipped its engine section. The entire back of the ship vanished into a cloud of debris. The cruiser spun, dead and helpless. Daejung stood frozen, watching the view screen. His face, once so proud, was now white with terror. He saw the flawless invasion turn into a nightmare. This was not a battle. It was a slaughter. Deep beneath a mountain on Earth, in a room full of screens and quiet tension, a young woman named Sumin watched the same battle. Her job was simple. She watched for a green light on her console. When it turned green, it meant a targeting computer had a perfect solution on an alien ship. All she had to do was press a large black button in front of her. A light turned green. She took a calm breath and pressed the button. Far away, in the dark silence of space, a rod launched from a hidden platform near Mars. It crossed the distance in a heartbeat and struck the wing of a hegemony command ship. The ship cartwheeled away, its communications array destroyed. Sumin did not cheer. She did not smile. She simply watched for the next green light. This was her duty. This was the reply. On the bridge of the flagship, Bakju gripped his chair as another impact shook the ship. He finally understood. Humanity's silence was not fear. Their simplicity was not weakness. They had looked at the stars and seen a threat. They had not built ships to meet that threat. They had built a trap. And his magnificent armada had flown right into it. The sky was full of fire, and it was all their own. The hegemony armada was in pieces. The orderly formation was gone, replaced by a spinning, drifting cloud of wreckage. Ships that had crossed the galaxy to conquer were now just scrap metal and tombs. The human bombardment did not stop. It was a storm of pure physics. The rods kept coming, relentless and precise. There was no anger in their attack. It was like a terrible, natural force. A hurricane of metal. The hegemony fought back. Bright lances of plasma shot from their remaining ships, aiming for the lunar base and the hidden orbital platforms. A direct hit vaporized one platform, turning it into a brief, expanding cloud of gas and fragments. But for every platform they destroyed, another one they had missed powered up and fired. The humans had built many more than anyone could have imagined. They had built for 50 years. They had built in secret, hiding their work, knowing this day would come. They had built with one simple, brutal idea: defense. On the flagship, Bakju held onto his command chair as another impact shook the deck. Lights flickered. A screen exploded, and an officer was thrown back from his station. The smell of smoke and fear filled the air. Daejung was on the floor, clutching a cut on his arm. His uniform was torn. His eyes were wide, seeing things that were not there. "They are monsters," he whispered over and over. "They just keep firing. They don't stop." Bakju looked at the young officer with pity. "No," he said, his voice tired. "They are practical. They are finishing the job." Down on Earth, it was night over Korea. A young boy named Minsu stood on his balcony with his mother. They looked up at the sky. It was beautiful. Streaks of light, like the brightest shooting stars he had ever seen, flashed silently overhead. "The fireworks are loud tonight," his mother said softly, putting a hand on his shoulder. Minsu nodded. He didn't know about the war in space. He just saw the pretty lights in the sky. He felt safe. He didn't know that each silent, beautiful streak of light was the end of a giant warship. He didn't know that people deep underground were protecting him. He just knew the night sky was putting on a show. Back in space, the flagship shook again. This time, the sound was different. It was a deep, groaning tear of metal. A red light flashed on Bakju's console. The engine section was gone. They were dead in the water. A floating target. The view screen showed the destruction of his fleet. It was a field of fire and broken dreams. The humans had not tried to communicate again. They had nothing more to say. Their message was being written in fire and metal, across the dark canvas of space. The attack was the reply. And the reply was almost complete. The roaring and shaking stopped. The sudden quiet was louder than the battle had been. On the broken bridge of the flagship, the only sounds were the crackle of broken wires and the low moans of hurt crew members. The main viewer was cracked, but it still worked. It showed the graveyard of the hegemony armada. Great ships were torn apart. Others floated silently, dark and dead. High Commander Bakju pulled himself up. His body ached. He looked at the screen. His great fleet, the pride of the hegemony, was gone. He had led them here to victory, and instead he had led them to their end. A soft beep came from the communication console. The officer there looked up, his face pale. "Commander, a message. From Earth. Audio only." Bakju nodded slowly. "Let us hear it." A woman's voice came through the speakers. It was calm and clear. It was not angry. It was not happy. It was sure. This was General Park. "High Commander Bakju. Your ultimatum has been answered. Your fleet has been neutralized." She paused. The words were simple, but they carried the weight of a planet. "Our scans show life signs on your ship and on 17 others. You will take your crippled vessel and you will leave our system. You will not be fired upon. This is your only warning." Daejung, holding his wounded arm, looked up in confusion. "A trick? They let us live? Why?" Bakju understood. He felt very old. He keyed the microphone, his voice rough. "This is Commander Bakju. Why? Why let us go?" General Park's reply was immediate. "So you can deliver our message." Her voice was like stone. "Go back to your hegemony. Tell them what happened here. Tell them the message of Earth. We do not want to fight. We do not want to conquer. We want to be left alone. But if you come to our home, we will be waiting. And our reply will always be the same." The communication ended. The silence returned. Bakju looked at the view screen one last time. He saw the blue planet, peaceful and quiet. He had thought it was weak. He had been wrong. Its strength was not in attack, but in defense. Its power was in its patience, its silence, and its terrible, simple answer to war. They had waited 50 years for Earth's reply. And it had come with fire.